For this tutorial, we're going to do this spatter effect I saw online by this designer called Raffi A. And I thought this would be a really fun thing that we could do with our portraits. I chose this photo that I took a few years back of my friend's daughter. Her name is Delia. Thought she would be a good choice. So when you find the picture that you're going to use, make any changes if you're going to do anything with brightness, contrast, exposure, etc. Do that first before we begin separating her from the background. When you get it where you like it, you want to go ahead and just flatten these layers out. So I'm going to come over to Layer and I will flatten the image. This will make it easier when we do go to separate her. Another thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to image size and I'm just going to make it 8.5 by 11. And this is, again, something that will be easy for next time. I'm also going to change the resolution to around 360, and it's over 11 inches. That's fine. There are a lot of different selection methods we can use, and if you've updated Photoshop, they have given you a selection and then select subject, which sometimes does a better job than, say, lasso tool or your quick selection tool. So let's see, it has selected a good portion, but certainly not the entire subject. So I'm going to come over to my quick selection tool and I'm going to add to this selection. I'm going to select and mask, click that on top, and it will pull me over into this new screen. Remember, you can change your view. I always like marching ants. And now I'm going to use this brush tool, and I will use my plus and minus selection tools up here, and I will minus this little bit here from the selection, and I will go through and add and minus to get the entirety of this image selected. Once I feel like I've done a good enough job, I'm going to come over to my view. I like putting it back onto layers, and that just gives me a really clean, crisp edge as to seeing what I need to go back and get rid of. And then I can go back to marching ants. When you are ready, you can click decontaminate colors. That's supposed to help separate colors from the background. And then you want to put this on a new layer. You want to make sure that it is good to go. Next, we're going to make a background image. So go ahead and do File, New, and it can be a print. And remember, I made my image 8.5 by 11. It's portrait style. I'm going to make a transparent background. You don't have to worry about anything else. And click Create. In a new tab, it will create a new blank image. And now I'm going to do a gradient behind it. If you come up here, after you've clicked on the gradient in the toolbar, you can see there's a lot of pre-made gradients that you can add, and I think this pastel one will make a nice backdrop. You can also change the way the gradient goes, so I just have it linear, but there's a lot of different gradient styles that you can experiment with. So I'm going to go from one corner down to the other. You don't have to copy me. Again, you can make it your own based on what your portrait looks like. All right, this is excellent. I'm also going to go into my filter gallery and I'm going to add a textured filter to it. And I like the rough pastel texture, zooming out a little bit so I can see more. And I liked this sandstone setting. So again, this is something that you can play around with and choose if you want to add a texture to it. Then click back on the tab with our selection cutout. I use the Move tool, but you could also copy and paste. There's lots of different ways to grab it from the selection and move it into our untitled background. And I just use the Move tool, drag it, and then drop it into place. I've got my smart guides on so I can line it up in the middle. If you don't see yours, you can go into View, and then you just want to make sure next to smart guides that you've got a check mark. And this will help as you're placing it, moving it around, you can get it centered. In the next step, we're going to draw. So I'm going to click on my layers and I'm going to add a new layer to draw on. This will be nice. If I make a mistake, I can just delete the layer and start again. I'm going to use my brush tool, and you want to select for your brush tool. I have a lot open. Let me scroll up to the top and get to the general brushes. And I'm going to choose a hard round brush. And you can adjust the size that fits. I don't want it to be too thick because She seems like a very delicate creature, so I can Command or Control Z and delete my test, go back, adjust the brush size, try it again. For some reason, every time I Command Z, it's clicking me off of my layer. There we go. All right, that looks really great. So I'll undo that, make sure I'm clicked on that layer. And then I'm just going to go around and trace. And you can Command or Control plus sign to zoom way in, or Command and Control minus sign to zoom out as you're doing this. And you just want to be very steady and slow. Now, every once in a while, stop and then pick it back up, because if you make a mistake, you can go back into your history or Command or Control Z and undo just that section instead of it undoing all of the work that you just did. So my suggestion is just to do it little piece at a time, stop, pick up the brush, and then start again. You can also, if you make a mistake, go to your eraser tool and you could just erase that section and then go back to, let me zoom in, go back to your brush, come back and redraw that little connection between the two. Just make sure you overlap so that you don't have any spaces in between. And then you want to do some of the clothing as well. I would leave the face alone. I would not draw on the face unless there is a style that you're going for. I don't want to squash your creativity. I would say sometimes with this, less is more. So I'm just going around drawing. These edges of the dress are going to get cut away. I'm going to actually use the eraser tool later on that layer. I'll show you how to do that effect. So now, based on Raffi A, I'm doing these drip marks. So it's as though she's a painting and the paint is dripping off of her dress. I am using black because that's what the inspiration was from Raffi A, but you could use a different color. You could do that as well. Now, this takes a very steady hand if you're using a mouse or a trackpad. If you are lucky enough to have access to a tablet, I can show you what that would look like in Photoshop Express. And now over on my iPad, I have Photoshop open. And I saved this file to my Creative Cloud, logged in through my enterprise account, and was able to find this right on my cloud. I have that hard round brush, just like I did last time. It is showing me the layers on the right-hand side, the exact same layers that I had in the other version that I was working on my laptop. And I'm using a stylus, or you can use an Apple Pencil, whatever you might have for your tablet, and you can continue drawing. You might find that you have a bit more ease and control doing this on a tablet instead of using the mouse or the trackpad. After I go through and I'm just sketching in some of the details in the dress itself, I'm going to show you the extra bit of the dress on the bottom, how you're going to select that. So be sure to switch over to the selection layer. That's the second from the bottom where she has been cut out. And then with your lasso tool, I'm just drawing around the bottom black lines and then swinging it around to the beginning. And any of the fabric that is in that section, I'm going to use my eraser tool, and I will go back over that section and show you here how it's just going to erase that selection. Nothing else, doesn't erase the other part of the dress. So I've just followed along that edge with the lasso tool, and that will get rid of the bottoms. And on my iPad, when I click back to the home button, it should automatically save everything that I've done, and it should sync to my Creative Cloud so that when I go back into my desktop, my PC here, I can see all the changes that I've made. So now I'm going to create a new layer, and we're going to do some splatter paint. And I'm going to choose my brushes. And I have some legacy brushes here that you might not have. So let me show you how to add those legacy brushes. You click this little icon and you should see legacy brushes. Choose that, and you should be able to add all of these brushes. If you go to your default brushes, and yours might not look like this, it might be smaller icons. You can actually change the size down here. And there's a couple of spatter brushes that I really liked. I played around with brushes before this tutorial to find the ones that I liked. That would be the one that I suggest, but you can use anything. I'm gonna choose my eyedropper. I'm gonna pick some colors for the fill color from the clothing. And then in my brushes, I am doing this on the background layer. So it is not coming on top of my person. It's going in between the person and the background. And I kind of like that. I guess you could do some spatter on your person as well if you wanted to spatter on the clothing. Again, these are all just choices style-wise that you get to make as the designer. And when I go to change colors, I'm going to make a new layer. That way, if I decide, oh, I don't like that color, they don't blend well together, I'm going to choose this green color. I can go back and I can always delete that layer. I can turn on and off the visibility of that layer to see if the colors work well together. But you could also just use one color. So now I can turn on and off the visibility, say of the green or the yellow, and see if I like it or not. And I think I do. I like how they go together. But if I didn't, of course, I could delete that layer. And when you are done, it's time to save your work. So let's go up to File, Save As, and I save it in my Creative Cloud files in a folder for this class, renaming it my first name, last initial, underscore. This is unit 04.2, and this is my splatter portrait. I'll save it as a Photoshop file, and then I'll go back up to File, Save As, and I'll change the format to a JPEG for my web page. And that is how you use Adobe Photoshop to create a splatter portrait.